Okay, in this video, let's have a look at carbohydrates, one of our groups of organic molecules. And we know a little bit about carbohydrates. We know they're in bread and cereals, and we know that they give us energy. When we look a little bit further, we're probably familiar with one that's shown here, and that's glucose. And we know that glucose is produced in photosynthesis. We need it for respiration. All living things use glucose to supply them energy in aerobic respiration. We also know that this molecule, glucose, can be stored, and it can be stored as starch in animals, in plants. It can be stored as glycogen in animals. We know that plants use it in their cell walls to make cellulose. It's part of the structure of DNA and RNA. It's even in the cell membranes as things like glycoproteins when it combines with proteins and lipids. So carbohydrates are used in a wide range of areas. Now let's just think about carbohydrates from the point of view of being a polymer. Now the basic unit are these simple sugars, things like glucose, and this is what we call a monosaccharide, a molecule just by itself. When we join two of these together with a bond, we get a disaccharide. If we join a whole lot of these monosaccharides together with lots of bonds, we get a long chain, and this long chain, which is a polymer, lots of monomers joined together, we're going to call a polysaccharide. We can imagine ourselves with this big long molecule, lots of glucoses joined together, and that's the sort of structure we see in something like starch, and it's a really good way of storing these individual glucose molecules. Next, we'll have a bit of a look at our structure here, and what we find when we look at the ratio of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms in carbohydrates, what we find is that we have a particular ratio, and there's twice as many hydrogen atoms as there is carbon and oxygen. And we often simplify this and say there's n number of carbon, 2n hydrogen and n oxygen. For example, what we have here is one that you're probably a bit familiar with, and this is glucose, with twice the number of hydrogen as there are carbon and oxygen. Now carbohydrates can be considered to be simple, like monosaccharides or disaccharides, things that we know about like glucose and fructose, lactose, sucrose as disaccharides have two simple monosaccharides joined together in the disaccharides, or they can be complex that are polysaccharides, and they be things like starch and glycogen, which are good for storing in plants and animals, but also things like cellulose. They're made up of lots and lots and lots and lots of monosaccharides joined together. Okay guys, so that's carbohydrates. We'll cover the formation and use of glucose quite a bit when we go through aerobic respiration and photosynthesis later in Unit 3. Understanding the storage molecules like glycogen and starch, they'll also be important as we explore different concepts through the year. So good luck with studying carbohydrates.